Hey everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm so excited to share this. Um, just a little background. I was deeply involved in the course a long time ago, and I've continued to look at it over the years and kind of mull on it, mostly argue with it, take it seriously, argue with it. But I mostly let it go. And in the last couple of years, I've focused on a form of, I don't know quite what to call it. I sometimes call it Christian Reiki, of taking in the energy of God to heal us. And I've had a lot of physical healings on this path. And recently I've been drawn back to the course. So that's just a little background that'll help this video make sense. Um, so I was at the airport, right outside the airport, um, for a very important trip. I'm here in New Zealand now. I was at the airport to, gonna get on the plane to come to New Zealand to meet this Christian pastor who is quite the facilitator of healing. I've never heard of anything like this. This guy he doesn't take any credit for it. He says it's Christ. And he says it's Jesus that does the healing. And in his presence, Jesus really seems to show up, like birth defects healed, cancer, schizophrenia, deafness, like insanity. I mean, this guy is really, his faith is off the chart. So I was coming here to see him, and both for my own healing and also to learn. And so I'm at the airport, fidgeting with this ticket, for my tram. I didn't pay enough money, so I had to put extra money on, and starting to feel resentful. And then I reached over to pick up my bag, and as I lifted it up, like I injured my back, like a jolting pain went up the left side of my back, and did the negative thoughts start coming? Oh, did the ego start speaking? You can't do this. You can't go on this trip. You've got a 12-hour flight. You've got 3 hours before your flight. Like, you can't do this. Maybe this is guidance that you're supposed to not go. And so I employed sort of the teachings I mentioned. Sort of the Christian taking in divine energy. Well, not really Christian, but the Christ-centered taking in divine energy to to heal this, and all the different techniques I learned through that. And and simultaneously, I was practicing course principles of staying completely centered in peace, completely centered in, not completely, striving to. um, Stay in trust that everything is okay, that I am a child of God, that nothing can injure me. But primarily, what I was doing was sort of the other. I'll put a link in the description below. It's this guy named Bruno Groening. Using his sort of techniques and teachings, and simultaneously staying really centered in my knowledge that nothing can harm me, just staying in that peace. And after about 20 minutes of doing that, the pain was cut in half. Like, it was excruciating to lift my bag. It was very, very painful to even walk or sit or do anything. Um, so so yeah, I cut the pain about in half, and it went down from pain to just like very extreme discomfort on the edge of pain. And I just felt so strongly guided to read The End of Death by Nuke Sanchez, this book on a course that I love. And just a little background. So I'm going to read a little bit from it. Why do we persist in suffering? This is page 26. Why would we prefer the illusion of fear and threat over consistent love, safety, and joy? What is the payoff? Our deeply buried fear of God is the burning fury that fuels our unconscious will to suffer. The secret catalyst keeps us identified with the personal self and its insane will to remain separate from God. Guilt motivates our ongoing desire to run away from God. This is our deepest, darkest defense against God's love. Our guilt is caused by the imaginary belief that we killed God because we seemingly abandoned love. We unconsciously believe we committed an unforgivable crime, forever darkening the universe. We believe we've sinned on an epic scale. And according to the ego, sin cannot be erased. So I'd read that earlier in the day, and I was kind of thinking about it all throughout. I was really, really sitting with it, and then I just felt so guided to this book. I love this book, and um, and I found myself almost immediately. I found myself on the bottom of page 30, where she talks about. Well, I'll just read it. I'll give you one small example of bringing the ego's agenda to light. I may feel a cold coming on. I'm well aware I have an important project to complete, yet the uninvestigated ego chooses this moment to attack with a cold. Its aim to thwart my plan. Make me miserable and convince me I'm at the mercy of my body. Clearly, then, as I reach for my 10th tissue, this is proof I must be a body and not God's perfect child. That I'm a body and not that. Beautiful light. The ego secretly informs me I'm separate from God's love. It tells me I'm powerless over the body, even though I share the infinite power of God's will. If I were to choose this opportunity to look within and open to Spirit's thought system, I would realize only the mind can command the body. The body could never betray me without my own consent. I would recognize I assign all meaning and power to everything in my world, including sickness. The cold has no meaning apart from what I give it, and cannot affect me unless I choose so in my mind. Armed with this empowering truth, I would question the ego consistently in this instance and every other that arose. In the continuing process of shedding light on its darkness, eventually the ego would have no choice but to disappear. When we question the ego, we always do it by going inward for guidance from our holy self. We uncover what is untrue by exposing it to the light of Spirit. In my example of the cold, once realizing I must have decided for the cold, then I can, with Spirit, reverse this decision through forgiveness. Upon radical self inquiry, I may also find I invited the cold because of my fear of completing the project, or because I needed a legitimate excuse for a day off from work. No matter what I find within, if I want the cause of all suffering to be undone, I apply forgiveness. And forgiveness cannot occur until I'm willing to look within at the ego's projected lie, together with the light of Spirit's love, interpreting it correctly for me. This process will feel counterintuitive. The ego believes our safety comes from not looking within, especially not looking at our darkest fears. But the truth is, whatever lies hidden in our unconscious will be projected outward. And it will be done so by manifesting as random attacks coming from outside of us. Boom. So I read that and I took it really seriously. I'm like, okay, Spirit, let's find this. What is this really about? And I looked within, and then I became conscious, first of all, that I had been resentful when I had been purchasing that ticket, working, to get the correct amount for the tram. All these negative thoughts and judgments about society had started to run, and they were literally running as I picked up the bag and injured the back. The next thing I became aware of was I was afraid of this trip. I was afraid of coming here and falling apart, which usually means getting into suffering and then turning to addictions to cope with the suffering. Yes, and even more so, I was afraid of feeling suicidal on this trip or even committing suicide because as soon as I get into addictions, then I feel suicidal. So that's what was some of what I uncovered. So I just one thing at a time. I just turned it all over to Spirit. I asked, "Is it true I'm not safe?" I apologized to modern society. I offered forgiveness. I offered forgiveness to it, to the complexity of modern society. Recognize that I'm a child of God and nothing can harm me. Worst case scenario, if I recognize that this back injury it was kind of a process. This back injury can't touch me. I'm spirit. I'm not a body. This back injury can't harm me. I'm spirit. Even if I go on a trip and get into suffering, suffering can't harm me. I'm spirit. I'm perfect in my core. My essence is perfect. Not me, this person that you're watching the video of. If I get into addictions can't harm me. I just went down through. If I felt suicidal, if I actually killed this body, that couldn't even harm me. I was starting to feel so much better. And then I really reflected on, what Nuke says is that all those things I just talked about were just kind of spikes, are little pieces of the fundamental guilt fear that I attacked God or actually killed God. And while on a conscious level, I don't believe that. Course in Miracles isn't about what's conscious. It's about what's unconscious and running the show. Initially, it's not about what's conscious. It's about uncovering that which is unconscious. I don't think it's a mistake that, in the first couple chapters that, Jesus uses Freud's language and really, the first couple, especially the first chapter, really lays the foundation that it's our misdirected miracle impulses that are really get us in trouble. So I just apologized to God. I just said, I know I haven't attacked you, and if I've tried in some way that I don't remember, I'm sorry, and I just accept the atonement for myself. Even if I succeeded, while I would have regret about it, even if I succeeded at killing God, of course not, I'm still innocent. I fully accept the atonement for myself. And I stood up and I felt a pop and I heard a pop and my back was healed. It continued to be uncomfortable, but the pain was gone. And I did quite well in the 3 hours before the flight. In the 12-hour flight, my back was uncomfortable, but there was no pain in my back. So physical healings are, from the Course perspective, are really a side effect of an internal shift. And I'm immensely grateful to Nuke for just how she's very clearly laid out how the ego works and what the root is. And so thanks so much, all of you, for watching this. I highly recommend her book. It's really, really opening the Course to me in a new way. And the other thing that's really opening the Course to me is I'm reading it one line at a time, starting with chapter 1. Not so much one line, it was one paragraph at a time, and then really sitting with each paragraph. What I'm discovering is it completely builds on itself. This is a complete system of thought. And even chapter 3 starts off by saying, Jesus basically says, the first 2 chapters are the foundation of this Course. And so I'm currently in this process of really reading and laying that foundation. So I hope this was helpful. Comments and feedback are very welcome. As I'm in New Zealand, instead of saying goodbye, I'll say good day, mate. I wish you a beautiful, miracle-filled day. Take care. Much love.